The Detroit Lions entered 2025 with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. They're ending it on their couches. Today, we're going to dissect the season's autopsy report with surgical precision, identifying the critical junctures where championship dreams fractured into bitter reality. Let's cut through the pain and find the truth. Forward down the field.
Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And off Berry. Skirts to the left side. Breaks a tackle. And he will take it in. Touchdown.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. That's what I'm talking about. It is caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh, baby, what a play that time. Aiden Hutchinson read that and blew it up. Big time stand by that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Gray Mains fam, welcome in. We are the Lions Gray Mains. My name is Chris Stone. I'm at castahead.net, and the two gentlemen flanking me on either side of your screen, on your right, on my left, stage right, who knows what that is. Dan Keener, DK, welcome in, my friend, and to my your left. Geez, I just can't get right and left. I'm not even going to try it anymore. DBC, Dr. Brent Kreider. Gentlemen, the season is over. The playoffs have begun, and we're not in it. But tonight we're going to look back, and we're going to talk about what went wrong and what might have been different for us in terms of outcome for our Detroit Lions. Had a few things changed along the way. The good, the bad. We're going to open up the corpse and take a look inside. Boys, I know we've got a few things to talk about outside of that before we get into it, because there's few shows where we get started and there's some breaking news beforehand. So, Dan Keener, I'm going to roll it over to you to talk about breaking news. I don't have a breaking news bumper, and I'm not gonna play that. But let's talk about some big news. Not necessarily surprising, was it, Dan?
No, not at all. And before we, everyone knows what that is if you follow the Lions. But let me start off with the whirlwind of the last 48 hours. So, obviously we're sitting home. We're not prepping for the playoffs. So Brad is already out there trying to figure out, how do I make this team better for 2026? Who do I need to keep? Who do I need to let go? Can I grab anybody, on the cheap that can fill in and cover some of these holes that we have, especially with the unknowns on our O-line. We could have three guys retiring. Well, we obviously Frank retired, but you could have both Decker and Glasgow retiring. That's, the rumor that they're both considering it. So let's just start real quick about some of these signings. When the season ends for an NFL team that's not in the playoffs, they immediately have the opportunity to start signing street free agents, their own guys off their practice squad or their own exclusive guys, as well as CFL guys. We have not signed any CFL guys, but we did keep all three of our exclusive rights free agents. Those were Jacob Sailors, running back, who was basically our primary kick returner, Michael Neese, one of our interior O-line depth guys, and then, of course, Legion of Whom, Hall of Famer Nick Whiteside, who got signed to the active roster.
We already have a Hall of Fame
season.
for the Legion of Whom. That only took one game, right?
Exactly. So Whiteside, he was going to get poached. It sounded like around, I don't remember exactly when it was, early December, and Lions just went ahead and brought him on the active roster for the rest of the year. So all three of those guys were re-signed. They didn't have a choice. Their exclusive rights, if we tendered them, and they either sign or they don't. But they took it immediately, so that's a good sign, right? And then, you go through your practice squad guys and say, okay, who do we want to keep that's on our practice squad for reserve futures contracts? All this does is guarantee that they'll stay on the Lions 90-man roster at the start of the new league year, and stay there until the Lions decide to either cut them or, run them all the way through the process and make them part of the team next year. So out of that batch, we had 16 players on our practice squad, and we actually signed 9 of them to these reserve future contracts. And if you look at them, the bulk of them had elevations. but not all of them. But so, number one was Devin Cochran, offensive lineman. He's one of the few veterans that were out there that we actually re-signed
Yep.
to this. We did not sign the bulk of our veterans that were on our practice squad because most of them were just, spackle brought in mid-season to patch a hole. So other guys were wide receiver Malik Cunningham and Jackson Meeks. Everybody's favorite 6th-round pick, defensive end Ahmed Hassanin. Zach Horton, the tight end, he got called up the last game there. Mason Miller, he never got elevated, but he's been with the Lions most of the offseason. He's another offensive lineman. Running back Jabari Small, again, no elevations, but he's a rookie, but he was actually a 24 UDFA of the Titans. Chris Smith, defensive lineman, we brought him in 2023 draft as a UDFA, and he's stuck with us for 3 years now in our practice squad. And lastly, another Legion of Whom guy, Lauren Strickland.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he actually played that game against Tampa, but he was definitely elevated forward along with Whiteside as two of the guys, and I think Mollett came up too, or got signed to the active roster to get us through that game. So those were the big ones that were all signed. They did not offer contracts to a rookie by the name of Keenan Garber. He's a cornerback. Pat O'Connor, who everyone recognizes, he's been with us a few years.
Yep.
Safety Demonte Kazi, he's a veteran. Giovanni Ricci, Chris Hubbard, who actually started at right tackle Sunday. Miles Adams and CJ Beathard. None of those guys were actually signed. Maybe they bring them back next year, but I suspect they've seen enough and they're looking for youngsters to backfill those spots. And then another signing today that kind of came out of the blue. This is a guy that Brent really liked last year's draft. I really liked him too for different reasons, but I think he's a good player. His name is Seth McLaughlin, and he is a interior offensive lineman, primarily a center. He was the center for Ohio State's national championship team for 10 weeks till he popped his Achilles in practice, so he didn't actually play in the playoffs against Michigan that year. That was 24, I believe. But hey, the kid played for 10 weeks, and he was first team All Big Ten. He was consensus first team All American, and he won this Remington Award, which is the award that goes to the best center in college football.
Yeah.
This is after winning a natty with Alabama a few years earlier. So, had he not popped his Achilles, he would have been the first or second center off the board, most likely in that draft.
Yeah.
I think they rated him third consensus after the injury. Ended up going undrafted. The Bengals signed him as a UDFA. Brent and I were both sad because we really would like to have him on the roster to try and let him get healthy and develop because we knew he was a good player. And we knew we had trouble at the position, obviously now. But we brought him in. He's 6'4", 305. His biggest knock is his arms are maybe a little shorter than you prefer, so he kind of gets susceptible to those interior D linemen that are super tall that can like snatch and grab you, But I'm glad to see just another, Brad thinking outside the box, and he could have signed with the Bengals, but he chose to come to us. So I'll take him. It's just another, more depth and more guys to compete and try and make this line better next year.
Probably better opportunity for him to get playing time considering our situation, right?
Worked out well for Kingsley when he went to Cleveland and told he was going to start, and they immediately made him inactive.
Showed him on the inactive list. It was like, hey, that's not what you guys said when I came here.
Right. I suspect he didn't know the plays is my guess, to be honest with you, but, whichever.
Yeah, it's good to see, like, boy, they didn't waste any time, already addressing, some issues, already addressing the interior offensive line, already securing a number of these players. Great breakdown, Dan. Thank you for that. Already securing these players that, listen, best case scenario, some of these guys maybe not even see the field next year because our starters are healthy, right? And they're playing really well, but we need these depth players. And a lot of these players that, like Whiteside is, Whiteside's they've been trying to, kind of keep him away from people because, he's an absolute absolute
Don't want to
player.
expose him.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Keep 'em on
Brent, I want to
wraps.
get your thoughts on that, but we want to say hello to.
I got a couple more things here I got to wrap up, though, real
Okay. Well, we do
quick,
want to say hello to
Chris.
Helpful Chase. Thanks for joining us. We're not talking draft tonight. We're going to talk about sort of an autopsy, but I like the pick. I like the energy. Helpful Chase. Keep bringing it. Absolutely. Dan, what do you got, man?
Lots of
Yep.
draft conversations, tons.
Yep. So the last couple of news items that hit, the first one, not surprising to be honest with you, because he's been pretty darn solid for the Lions in their back office, and that's Mark Disner. He's been kind of our cap guru for the last couple of years, amongst other things. And with Atlanta brooming those guys out of office and cleaning house in there, they actually asked permission today to speak to Disner about their football operations. So if he does happen to go, that would be a huge loss for the Lions. I'd hate to see him go there, but you always want to see guys do well. Um, but that'd be another loss out of our front office. So, that weakens the team overall unless they have somebody. I mean, it's just like coaching staffs, right? If you got somebody to backfill them that you've been grooming, you're in good shape. But if you don't, then you're not. And then finally, just like at Christmas, when you keep that last present that is the most intriguing, whether it's the biggest one or the most odd looking box, and it's definitely not freaking clothes. Somebody got fired today. John Morton, bye-bye. Wicked Witch is dead. So he is no longer with the Lions. He unfortunately sealed his fate earlier this year. Got himself demoted. Didn't mesh well. I mean, he's essentially. I just being honest. I don't know, Brent. Maybe you can kid me all you want, but it feels like he's Anthony Lynn part 2. I mean, veteran guy brought in. Had some success other places, but just didn't, for whatever reason, just couldn't make it work here and didn't do what Campbell needed him to do. And, he kind of hurt our team a little bit out of the gate.
Yeah, we're going to get into this later in the show, but what went wrong this year? I think you have to start with 3 or 4 things that ultimately caused the undoing of the Lions this season. And the first was probably Johnny Morton. The selection of Johnny Morton as an offensive coordinator, where he had previously only been an offensive coordinator for such illustrious teams as the New York Jets. And the reality was that it was probably going to be a 1 year and done, even if Johnny Morton hadn't been demoted just a few games into the season. That really started a series of events. And last show, for those of you that tuned in on the last show, Dan was suggesting that he have a new role, and I was, of course, of the opinion that sanitation engineer was the right
Ford
role.
Field needs sweepers after the game too.
Anything other than football operations. Johnny Morton appears to be a really good guy, and people love him, but I just don't think he fits the culture. The win at all cost. The win, look at Dan Campbell. The guy was completely beside himself. He gave himself an F in coaching for the season. I think that was a bit harsh, but the point is, he probably would have given Johnny Morton an F- if there was such a grade. The reality was that it was the bad choice. It set us up for a litany of things that happened throughout the year.
It was the pebble that started the landslide.
It
I
really
think is what you're
was.
trying to say.
Yeah. It definitely was, and Brent, I'm glad you said that, because that kind of rolls into the topic of conversation today, which is, it's always one of those things where, I don't know about you guys, but like when the season is over, I just kind of shut everything down and like I don't, because you immediately you go to sports feeds and you'll see memes and you'll see comments and you'll see hot takes, and it'll make you feel a certain way. So I think it's sometimes it's good to kind of cut the cord and step away from a little bit and kind of take a breath, and then kind of go back and say, listen, you can't just forget what happened, right? So I think it's good and it's healthy for us to, as Lions fans, go back and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to give you a hot take and tell you that this team is bad and that we should get rid of our quarterback and but we definitely should have and did get rid of our offensive coordinator, and those are things we identified early in the year. But I think it's healthy for us as Lions fans to kind of at this point, all right, we've had a minute, right? We've even had a win, guys, between not making the playoffs and the end of the season, which we're not really going to go too far into it. I understand it didn't really matter except for draft
finished
position.
with a winning record.
Still finished with a winning record. That's 4 seasons in a row, right? 2 that ended up in playoff berths, 2 that did not. But I think it's important in it, and there's only one of the Gray Mains that did predict that the Lions would win against Chicago, but I digress. Because it's pride. It's pride, and Dan took that into the next season when we went 9-8 and beat the Packers when there was nothing for us to play for, and that there's something that can be carried over into the next season, especially for those players who are still there. So I think it is healthy for us to do this kind of thing. Let's touch a little bit here and kind of close the book on McLaughlin. Mike Terry says the NFL draft profile had McLaughlin rated as a 5.98 average backup special teamer. Seth McLaughlin draft and comeback. But, I mean, the guy won the award for the best center as well, which is interesting.
NFL.com I did some research for, after they picked him up. NFL.com had and ESPN were the 2 absolute lowest rankings for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they factored into it recovery from his Achilles.
Yep.
Like I said, he could probably be a little heavier. He's 6'4", 305.
Yep.
And his arms are a little short, but other than that, he proved when he played with Ohio State that coming over and getting coached and playing, Alabama, the hell of a team. He won a national championship with them too, and they have a great offensive line coach. But he changed teams and got better, and he fixed some of the issues he had. And it's just it's hard to say. Those are rankings, and but you just don't know. If he had finished the year out and they had won the Natty and he was healthy, he probably was drafted in the 3rd round, maybe 4th.
Yeah.
Instead he gets a UDFA. But hey, we have 2 interior offensive linemen. One of our left guards, a 5th round draft pick, and we've got a guy at 6th round that was getting some snaps at the end of the year, and Miles Frazier. So
and looks
you just
good.
never know.
He looks good too, so that's good.
He does.
I know, super fan Miles Frazier, super fan Brent Kreider loves that. But I will say this. So let's peel it back to September, here and kind of talk about this, because I think Helpful Chase here and what he's got to say, I think, plays into this as well. So yes, John Morton, as of a few hours ago, was relieved of his duties for the Detroit Lions as offensive coordinator. He is fired and no longer a part of the team. And so we know that when we're talking about Dan Campbell and some of the frustrations that we've had, especially near the end of the year, there was a lot on his plate, including calling plays. Best case scenario, we've spoke about it. The 3 of us have spoken about it on shows, and that Dan needs somebody calling plays for him that he can trust to run the offense. And Morton wasn't that guy. He saw that early on and said, "You're not going to do that anymore. I'm going to have to do this." And he sort of kept it on the rails, but it's not good enough. There's too much other things going on for a head coach. So yes, Helpful Chase. We do believe that there will be an offensive coordinator that an absolute necessity that will be calling plays. I just can't see him calling plays anymore. There's just too much on his plate. But guys, when we peel back
unless he brings in somebody to help manage the game day for him, someone that is in charge of timeouts, in charge of what's going on in the replay booth, in charge of on the game, the inflow of the game, those sorts of things. So that's, we can talk about a little bit more later with that, but I don't think he's just going to hand the reins over to somebody
Yeah.
right out of the gate. I think it's going to be a gradual process, like with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we had at the beginning of the year, we had a complete bloodletting in the coaching staff. We had,
Oh my
and it
gosh,
wasn't just,
10.
it was Ben Johnson, it was Aaron Glenn, it was Terrell Williams, it was like we had something like 11
Quarterback coach, offensive
coaches,
coordinator, defensive
tight ends,
coordinator,
uh,
wide receiver coach. That's a huge one.
right?
Tight ends coach, which we're going to lose again. So he's going back to college.
You're right.
But
You're right. So we've got that, and then Dan hires John Morton, right? So that felt like it was more continuity versus innovation, right? This is the guy that knows the offense and was here before, and could do that. So Brent, let me roll this to you. Do you see this as in kind of talking about what Helpful Chase here is talking about with the offensive coordinator position? Was this Campbell's just sort of being loyal to his system, or was them just kind of like cheaping out, on getting an offensive coordinator in here? What do we need to do in terms of bringing in an offensive coordinator? Do we look at these names? We see Cliff Kingsbury maybe is now going to go to the Baltimore Ravens, or should. And I know the fan base is like, hey, we need to get this person and we need to get this person, Raheem Morris, but he's a defensive coordinator.
Monken's the
People
latest,
just
greatest
talking,
toy.
throwing big names out there like it's fantasy football. Brent, what's your take on what we do at the offensive coordinator position? As that was a key reason why this season kind of flew off the rails at times.
Yeah, the Lions went from top 5 offense all time, I think actually 4th best offensive season all time in the history of the National Football League, to a pretty good offensive team, top 5 teams, but they underperformed. And I think we can point to a number of reasons why they underperformed. First and foremost, the offensive line. The offensive line didn't perform up to standards. And so when you throw in the fact that you brought in a guy that was ill-equipped to be a successful offensive coordinator, it just exacerbated the situation. And
Yeah.
so the good news for us Lions fans is that we had a top 5 offense in the NFL and we had a bad year. So the
I got a new offensive coordinator right here.
yeah, the offensive coordinator that the kitty that Dan's got there um, is probably not the right selection. But the guys that I'd start to be looking at are those up and coming young coaches, right? The guys that are absolutely the next step is I've served as a position coach, multiple position coaches, played the game. One of the names that we were talking a little bit about in the pregame show, Antoine Randall, who went over to Chicago. Dan mentioned him, and I absolutely would love the idea of somebody like an Antoine Randall coming in. Frank Haley, I don't know that Frank Haley is the guy.
Hank Fraley.
Hank Fraley.
Yeah, Hank Fraley. Sorry, I'm thinking.
If Frank Haley's available and he's a young and up and comer, I say we bring him in.
He could be innovative. He could be innovative.
Very, very innovative. Hank Fraley. Yes, thank you. Hank Fraley, he doesn't strike me as an offensive coordinator. He's a rough, tumble guy.
He's never called
Exactly.
plays. He's always coached offensive line. And he's fantastic at it.
Exactly right. He's a position coach. There are tons of position coaches in the history of the National Football League that were never coordinators, that were never head coaches.
That's right.
And I think he's reached his glass ceiling. Peter principle applies, right? Much like in the case of JMO, you put Johnny Morton into position till you keep giving him opportunities till he fails. And so I am worried about running the risk of promoting somebody like Hank Fraley who would not be able to be successful. There's a bunch of guys across the NFL. I think what Dan should be doing is Dan should be looking at all those quarterback and receiver coaches, running back coaches who have a mind, and it's well known in NFL circles, the guys that are in that position. JT the old
Barrett.
quarterback, yeah, from the
Definitely a name to look at for sure with history on this
there's a
program.
bunch of guys like that. We could throw out 50 names like that. So my opinion is that Dan brings in somebody that he can mold, somebody that he can, that aligns with their culture, and has those base experiences to be able to come in and start to call plays.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Those two names are the two guys that I definitely have in my that fit the mold for me. I really like Randall L. I think it was, our wide receivers still performed well this year without him, but that's a big loss. He's a guy that was an integral part of this team for 4 years, and losing him to the Bears, he got his shot to go over there,
Yeah.
but I would him or even Barrett. I mean Barrett, regardless whether he played for Ohio State or not, the guy he's a very
Oh,
cerebral
oh, he played
player.
for Ohio State? No, he's out.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
just
Guys,
He's the
that's
guy that
two.
everybody
That's
draws the
two.
line around him when he on the fourth down play, right? But those two guys there, and then honestly, if you look on staff, we do have one guy on staff that could be molded, and it's not Scotty Montgomery. He doesn't fit the mold. Montgomery's an older guy. He's been in the NFL or college for 19 years,
Love
but
Montgomery though, but not in that position. I agree.
right, he's assistant head coach wide receivers. I think he's fine where he's at.
Yeah.
The guy I'd be looking at to groom to make him and mold him would be running back coach Tashard Choice. He's the one guy on the roster that kind of fits that profile of what we'd be looking for of a young up and comer. We need a guy that's got some balls because that's what Campbell has. You can't have a guy like Morton who called games like he was scared half the time in the beginning of the season, calling stupid plays, predictable plays. You lost that when we lost Ben Johnson, and this is the only time I'm going to speak nice of Benedict, is that we lost the unpredictability of his play calling when he left us. He would call things on 3rd and 8. You're thinking pass. The dude's calling he's calling a quick hitter up the gut for 10, and we lost that. We also don't have the ability to do that, to what Brent said, with our O line, not obviously anywhere near as good as it was the year before. But he's the only guy in the roster I see right now that says, yeah, he could be somebody you can mold. Clearly, the guy that went to the Jets with Glenn, that did not pan
Oh,
out.
tight
I don't
ends
know, Mike,
coach
if you
who's now their OC.
Taryn
Tyler.
Eggerstaff?
Yeah.
Tanner
Tanner Engstrom.
Engstrom.
There we go.
Yes.
Mike Terry.
He was a guy that we were all like, hey, this would be a guy that they're trying to groom. That didn't work out. Now, granted,
First
it's the
year.
Jets.
Yeah. First year,
And they suck.
yeah, there's a lot going. There's a lot
Two
going
two
on there.
things with that. First year with the Jets, and Glenn's a defensive minded coach. You still, as an OC, have to answer to your head coach.
Sure. Yeah.
And if that's not what Glenn wanted to run and wasn't going to cut him loose, then so be it. Mike posted in there about Nate Shieldhouse. He's been, he was a quarterback. I think he played for Illinois, maybe. Been in the NFL a little bit. He's in his mid 30s, up and comer, plays for the Rams. So right there, the lineage there. That'd be someone that can bring in and mix that Sean McVay style with the Sean, who's the Denver's coach?
Peyton.
Sean Payton style. Because I mean, Campbell is a Payton disciple. He's from the Payton tree, which evolves up to comes up to Bill Parcells, right? So you mix those two together, and maybe that's somebody that's like, hey, there you go, But Brent nailed it. There's 30 or 40 dudes in the NFL that are just waiting for an opportunity to come in, and I think with a youngster, Campbell's going to have somebody he can mold better. With Morton, I wouldn't want to say it was a situation where maybe he didn't want to hurt his friends' feelings. I don't see Campbell being that guy. I see him being very decisive and not really giving a shit about anybody's feelings. But, if it took him over half the season or about half the season before he finally put his foot down, and
Right.
it went about 2 games too long. I mean, that Minnesota Vikings game, let's be honest, that was the breaking point for our season, that first Vikings game. We lost to a very mid team with basically a quarterback in his like 4th start. They didn't do anything special. You go back and look at the stats of that game. There was nothing
we
special
handed
about
them
that Vikings offense.
three different plays, whether it was a return, a turnover in our own zone. We handed that game and couldn't end up.
But the
outplaying
offense
them,
sucked.
So definitely.
We had 20 rushes. Montgomery was the leading carrier. I think he had 20 yards. That's almost as bad as the Pittsburgh game a couple weeks ago.
Right.
So, that to me was when obviously the writing was on the wall, because that's when Morton got taken off play calling duties. Next week we tossed 44 against Washington. We thought we were all saved, and then we laid an egg in the bad weather against Philly, and so on and so on. But yeah, I don't know. I think Brent's right. There's plenty of guys to choose from. I think with Campbell, he's like Tony Stark. He learns from his mistakes. I think he's gonna hopefully figure this out and not do what he did last year. Go back to what worked. You just got to find the right personality and the right coach to put in that position.
Cue the video of Dan Campbell putting on the Iron Man suit. Yeah, and to answer a question and kind of to put a bow on this, helpful Chase. We absolutely feel like the OC that they're going to bring in is not just going to be a guy that's just going to call plays. This is going to be somebody that's going to innovate. Like, one of the big reasons why Ben Johnson, got to be Ben Johnson is because, yes, I mean, he clearly not only just ran Dan's offense, properly, but he also was an innovator and also, took a lot and added value to that existing offense. And, but what happens when you're a really good offensive coordinator? You end up with a head coaching job. And so that's kind of why we're here. So guys, I'm going to roll this because I have a feeling that this is on your last season autopsy. And tell me if it's not, but and feel free to segue into one of your own. But for me, what I think was a huge moment, and I've talked about it on many of our shows, which really affected our season, was actually something that happened prior to the start of the season, which was Frank Ragnow retiring at age 29. And that just basically completely changed what we did. Obviously, that came out before the draft. Tried to do whatever we could with Glasgow and Frazier and some of these guys to come in and try to piecemeal this thing together. But clearly, I think one of the things that hurt us most was the retirement of Frank Ragnow. And then, of course, he tried to come back near the end of the year. And we thought, here he comes to save the day, Mighty Mouse theme. And turns out had a torn hamstring or something like the grade 3, which was like absolutely ridiculous. But anyway.
It was off the bone, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean.
Yeah, and his pain tolerance was such that he just thought he had a little pulled hamstring.
Yeah, I got a little niggle here. So
just rub a little fish oil on it,
rub a little dirt on it,
little deer blood.
Yeah, guys, that's my biggest pain point of the season, which really turned things into that. Anything to say on that, or do you guys want to roll into some of your moments of the what could have been for the Detroit Lions this season?
I mean, I've got a couple. I can roll into them really quick and then turn over to Brent. Obviously the Vikings game is my number one. That's when the Morton stuff came to a head. Honestly, my number two, and this might be a little weird one, my number two was the nonsense from that Kansas City game. It feels like, and call me conspiracy theorist, whatever, but it feels like once Brian Branch got in that dust up at the end of the game, it feels like the NFL and the officiating changed towards the Lions, like negatively. Brian Branch got suspended, which was ridiculous, considering that Smith-Schuster was really the one that caused the bulk of that to start and after the fact.
And turned around and went back at Branch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And started the melee. I mean, it was over with. Pacheco had him and he was going aside and it was done.
Hmm.
But that whole thing, that dust up on national TV,
Yeah.
I feel like that just changed the NFL and the officials' perception.
Hmm.
The NFL, you know how they are. They're all about the shield and the brand, and they anything be damned that makes it look bad, and they felt that made them look bad. And looking at our outside of the Washington game, a couple games later, you look at our penalties, it just feels like, and I did a little bit of a study, we definitely had more penalties called against us than what the officiating average should have been during that after that game, right? I mean, I did that every game. I looked at the home, the way, who the crew was, what they call, versus what the team's top tendencies are. And the Lions were over by a penalty or two penalties almost every game. And the thing about it is it wasn't just the penalties; it was the wacky calls. We got a few went our way, but there were so many that just didn't go our way, or
Hmm.
you know they went against us in a critical situation, but the officials swallowed their whistle against the other team when it could have benefited us. Again, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but it is what it is. It's everyone can see it. Everyone's been bitching about the officials all year. I mean, as soon as the NFL embraced gambling, they brought this on themselves. You cannot take human nature out of it. And when gambling is involved and all of a sudden changes in major gambling lines are being impacted due to on-field calls or no calls, that's a problem. NFL is going to have to deal with that, or there's an integrity issue with their organization going forward. So that's my number two. And then lastly, I didn't even think about the Ragnow thing, and that's a great point, Chris. I didn't even really think about that. I was thinking in season because we started off so hot. We were 4-1, 5-2. But it was when Branch and Arnold both went out. Our defense, our offense has been struggling all year, but our defense, which had been playing, yardage wise, point wise, we were actually top 10 right up until that Green Bay game around
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Yep.
We lost those guys for the rest of the year, and it was over. The back of our defense with Kirby being out the entire back 2/3 of the season, our defense just couldn't keep up anymore. The offense was okay, just good enough. It was hot in a game, then it was lukewarm in another, but the defense was still only giving up like 17, 20 points a game. That's usually enough for this team to win, and we won a lot last year where we just flat out outscored teams. So those are my top three. So I'll throw it over to Brent.
Yeah, guys,
Oh,
you guys nailed it because I mean, when you talk about Lemony Snicket, the kids movie Lemony Snicket's
What
the
limit?
series of
What? We're gonna
mis
get banned.
Lemony
We're gonna
Snicket.
get banned on YouTube for those words. What did he? What?
well, the undoing of the Lions started in the Cincinnati game.
Yeah.
And when we were prepping for this, and I said, Dan, you go first because I don't think you're gonna say what I'm gonna say. And you touched on it a little bit because ultimately the injuries that we had in the Bengals game led to some trends that I'll point out that I think ultimately kind of had the season go south. And first and foremost
Mhm.
was that the Bengals had about 5.3 yards per carry. They stopped running the ball because they got down so much because of those early three turnovers. And then Jake Browning completed nearly 70% of his passes,
Yeah.
6 yards per attempt. And we gave up 24 points to a very poor offensive team who had who had averaged 6.5 points in the previous 2 weeks. And that was not by coincidence. It was directly related to what Dan said with the injuries. We lost Terry and Arnold.
Yep.
We had no Rakestraw, right? Rakestraw got injured in the preseason.
You're right.
Terran Arnold then is injured, and then you lose two Pro Bowl safeties. We bemoan that week in and week out, but that's when it started the trend. And then after that, what happened? Loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win,
Loss,
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 loss, loss,
loss. Win.
win, right? And so the
Hmm.
where this all started, and I did the same as you guys. I was looking at where did this series of unfortunate events begin that ultimately undid the season. It was the loss of Terrion Branch for suspension, and then and then having Kirby Joseph out. And then we had one good game with our secondary. They're going to be Hall of Famers in the in the Lions folklore about what they were able
Boy,
to
we
do
still
against Tampa.
we did think that was just going to, boy, that like look at all these great guys that we didn't even know, the Legion of Whom, and it was like, yeah, that was that kind of burned in a few weeks. But that is an excellent point, Brent. When you look back at the season, I don't look at the Cincinnati game, but you're right. It's like, yeah, because you look at it and you go, wow, we won the game, right? But that was the game that these guys got hurt. That was the Kirby, like you could kind of see the knee stuff happening, that was that, and these are injuries that never went away, and some that will, unfortunately,
may never go away.
Will ever go away in the case of Kirby and his situation, which we can get into later. But those are excellent points, and that was when I think back at the Cincinnati game, guys, I think about the Terrion going out and who came in for Terrion, Amik Robertson on the edge, and you remember that time where he just got smoked by Jamar Chase because they just
roasted. He was 30 yards behind him on that touchdown.
It was, and I saw that and I was like, uh-oh, like.
And the other thing that started to happen was that it reared its head in the Green Bay game, right? We talked a little bit about Shep's in-game adjustments, and I still have issue with Shep. I really have issue with his ability to adjust. And when we played Green Bay and they just started running the ball down our throat, he didn't adjust the defense to stop the run. Now, at various points through the season, when he brought Hutch in out of that wide 9 and started, we could shut the run down. And we had such a high rating with Tyleek in a defensive tackle compared to when Aline came back. And these are the types of things that in-game adjustments, player adjustments, and if you got Aline not at 100%, you've got a young guy who has a really good against the run stop rate, like Tyleek did. I still have issue with Shep, and for him to say that no adjustments are going to need to be made next year, that's a major red flag for me.
You want to touch on this breaking news that Mike posted, or you want me to pull it up really quick?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it up. So we talked a little bit about some of the offensive coordinator stuff, and Helpful Chase is still in the house, commenting away. We appreciate that, and this is kind of pertains to what we talked about earlier. A name is emerging for the Lions offensive coordinator search. And that is the one and only, this is a familiar name for all of us, and he's wearing a Lions uniform. This is David Blau. So the Lions have started, this is per Ian Rappaport at Rap Sheet, the Lions have started their offensive coordinator search with an intriguing name, David Blau, a former Detroit Lions quarterback. Blau was assistant quarterback coach with the Commanders, but did the quarterback coach job after Tavita Pritchard left. And he's calling that a sneaky hot name. Now, I did see this, like people mentioning this guy's name. I know there was if you guys remember the Hard Knocks show when you watched HBO, there was a lot of the conversations about him, and he's got his wife, I believe, is an Olympian or track star, sprinter, yeah. And so it's a kind of a good story. Never ended up being a great quarterback, but definitely was added into the coaching squad. This is an interesting name. I don't know, guys. I mean, this kind of feels like we're talking about somebody. You want to talk about a young name and a guy who's never called. I mean, here we are saying, hey, Hank Fraley's never called, plays before. We mentioned all these other guys, JT Barrett, he's never called plays before, but these guys are all have been, coaches. Neither has David Blau, as far as I know, called plays before, but.
Did Ben Johnson call plays before?
I don't know. Did he?
He did not.
What's consistent with all of them? They were quarterbacks.
Yes.
The guys that understand how to diagnose defenses, break down defenses, and have ran successful offenses in college. And I think that's the recipe for success. It's not always going to be quarterbacks, but you see a theme here with the names that we've been talking about. A lot of them are
Mm-hmm.
quarterbacks, and
You
so
know,
somebody that's young, and the Lions have had other quarterbacks now coaching in the NFL that they developed. One out
one
of
of them's the
Boise
head
State,
coach of the Saints right now,
exactly out of Boise
Kellen
State.
Moore,
Yeah, and so
another guy with a noodle arm from a small school that was a backup
yeah,
to Matt
and
Stafford.
Dan makes fun of noodle arms, but they played in the NFL, right?
Not
And
well.
That
and
means
I
they got to be smart. If you got a noodle arm and you're playing in the NFL, that means you got to be smart and know where to throw the ball and anticipate.
exactly right, because these guys made the most of their limited athletic abilities to play
Mm-hmm.
at the highest level and were successful, regardless of whether they had a long career, Hall of Fame career like Drew Brees. Drew Brees was accused of being a small guy. Troy Aikman didn't have a big cannon, but man, he was accurate. So there are a lot of quarterbacks that have had success in the NFL with noodle arms that weren't Brett Favre. But the bottom line is he's exactly the type of guy I would expect Campbell to develop.
Yeah, because he's moldable, right? He doesn't want, he screwed up. He brought in Anthony Lynn, he brought in John Morton. The two things those guys had is they had proven, just for Brent, proven history as a coach in the NFL, good or bad. They had a lot of stuff in their ways and they have ways of doing things. A young guy, and not to say I'm not trying to make it seem like Campbell's going to bully anybody, but it's about growing them the way you want them to grow and nurture them so that way they do, they become what you want them to become. And that's what Ben Johnson, he was with us all 4 years of Campbell. Like, was he a carryover? Wasn't
He
he
was,
on the prior staff?
yeah,
Yes, he
he
was.
was. Well,
So,
well, Ben,
so
Ben was malleable, right? He could,
yes,
and he was not so confident his first couple seasons, like he became,
we didn't have to worry about it because Lynn was coaching his first season under Campbell, for at least for half the season, and then Campbell took over for the rest of the year. But that's the thing that it's like you can see what not to do, and I think Blau. I think I read from what Mike posted. He was with the Commanders.
Yes.
So again, he left our system, so he's going to see other systems. If he was with the Commanders last year when they came into town and smoked us, then he's going to pick some things up on what they did right, before the rails came off this year. But again, I would have no issue if that's who Campbell feels fits the profile of a guy he can bring in, and this isn't a comfort situation. I don't even know if Blau even overlapped with Campbell. Maybe he did. I know he was Stafford's backup for a couple of years. Back in let me see, where did I
I
see
think
that
he
at?
Yeah,
He
that'd be
was
interesting.
Stafford's backup in 21 and
yeah,
19 to 21.
So he was here when
and
Campbell was here.
Yeah, so he was here
he was on
during
Hard Knocks,
Goff's
wasn't he?
first year.
Because didn't they talk about his wife on Hard Knocks?
Yeah,
That
he was here in
Yeah.
2021 during Goff and Campbell's first year, and that was the Anthony Lynn year, I might add. And then the next year we let him go, and Sudfeld was brought in as the backup, and then Teddy, then
Yeah, because at the
Hendon.
end of Hard Knocks, Blau gets cut.
Yeah, he does.
And so that
No,
was
but I think he was on the practice squad, and like he stuck around, right, Chris? So but he wasn't
exactly.
like the
Yeah,
primary
yeah.
backup.
He
They
was
actually
cut,
brought
but they
in
kept
Tim
him.
Boyle.
Yeah.
They brought Tim Boyle in to be the primary.
Tim
He's
Boyle.
a veteran. Yeah.
The legend
Yep.
Tim Boyle, the
Legend Tim
prototypical
Boyle.
size quarterback who could
I
throw to the
asked
other team like
Gronk.
no other quarterback.
yeah,
I
the
asked Grok to give me the backup quarterbacks for the Lions for the last 15 years.
Oh God.
And some of these infamous
You need
names
sleep.
starting in 2012, Sean Hill,
Oh.
Orlovsky, Kellen Moore, Jake Ruddock, Matt Castle,
Rudock.
Jeff Driscoll, David Blau, Chase Daniel for a year, then Tim
Yeah,
Boyle
that's
and David
great.
Blau, Sudfeld, Bridgewater, Hooker, and this year Kyle Allen.
You know,
Hell
that's
yeah.
a game. That's a game we need to play, guys. We could play Detroit Lions backup or chef or like something like that. And we'll start throwing out names and Detroit Lions backup or not. Like, if you would have said Chase Daniel, I would have said he wasn't a Lions backup. I had no idea that he was a backup. But now
Just
that I
1
think
year.
about it, yeah, like, maybe
No one
not
could
even.
see him because he was
Yeah,
below their field of
he's like
vision.
5'2",
Really
right?
cool.
But not
Sorry,
a new
Chase,
arm.
if you're following
The
us.
interesting thing about Blau, if he ends up being the guy, is he has learned from some really, really good coaches to learn from. Whether we like Kingsbury or not, he was an understudy to Kingsbury, Dan Quinn.
Kingsbury may
spent
take him to Baltimore if he ends up being the Baltimore coach. Like Kingsbury's going to bring his guys too.
Not if we hire him first.
right. Yeah. So
So he
he's learned under he's learned under some really, really interesting folks to learn under.
Yeah.
He was
I
the
don't hate
assistant
it.
quarterbacks coach last year when they beat us in the playoffs
Yep.
with the Commanders, and this year he was been the interim quarterbacks coach after Pritchard got shit canned middle of the season. So that's the extent of his coaching.
Yep.
He is 30 years old. That is perfect to start molding.
And back to the question that was asked early in the show, will Dan Campbell continue to call plays? If somebody like Blau is brought in, Campbell will continue to call plays.
He will, yes,
for the
until he's
short term,
comfortable he
until
can
he's
do it.
confident that he can do it.
Yep.
And
And that's why I mentioned the game day manager to help him out on the sideline, whether it's one of his non-position coaches, like one of the staff, the sports staff that monitors, what does it doesn't McVay have like a get back guy that grabs him so he doesn't get penalties on the sidelines?
I've got a get back guy. Hey, get back. Get back.
But so to answer your question, Chris, you brought up at the beginning of the show, it's if he's not going to hand out the play calling duties, he has to alleviate some of the pressures elsewhere.
Delegate,
he needs someone to
yes.
help him with that stuff.
Yep.
Someone watching the clock, the play clock. Not that we had a ton of issues with that this year, but watching the play clock, make quick decisions. Down and distance on fourth downs. I think he did okay. Clearly, he was not. He had to adapt on the fly, right? I mean, he wasn't expecting to do this, but I don't think he was awful at it. Most of our issues later in the year were related to the defense, just running out of bodies,
well,
but
and you can't rule out
and the O-line.
The O-line, yeah, exactly. Because
I mean,
the
two
Vikings
places.
game was a disaster at Minnesota. We couldn't keep anything out of the backfield.
So Chase says, I hope Blau got a better mind for the game than he did a feel for it, because all I remember are holding onto the ball and interceptions. Yeah, lucky for us, like, you don't have to be an exceptional quarterback in the NFL to be an exceptional offensive coordinator or coach. Otherwise,
well, there's a difference between knowing what to do and being able to physically do it.
That's right.
Ask Orlovsky; he still gets res for running out of the back of the damn end zone.
Guys, I'm going to take I want to take a quick thing just to, and this is not, necessarily breaking news, but for those that are watching either on replay or live, starting next week, we're going to be adding a new segment to the show, and we thought, listen, we got off season. We're going to be talking about, obviously the draft is going to be, the free agency is going to happen. There's going to be news that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be coming up with topics, but we felt like a segment that we can talk about every week, and we'd love to have fan participation. We would love to have those that are subscribers and part of the Gray Mains fam to be a part of this and vote for this as well. Here is going to be the next segment going forward in the offseason for the Lions Gray Mains. Here we go. That's right. It's the Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated. What is the Hall of the Underrated? Folks, we talk about all the top players for the Detroit Lions all the time. We talk about Megatron, we talk about Barry, we talk about the current players who are amazing, whether it's Amon-Ra St. Brown or Aiden Hutchinson, Jared Goff, and historically we can talk about all of these players who are in the Hall of Fame. But like, we talk about these players that probably will never make Canton, but in our hearts, in our Honolulu blue and silver hearts. They are in our Hall of Fame. So we have a Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated. So every single week, we're going to take a portion of the show and talk about some of these players. We've got a great list ahead. And if you that are Gray Mains fam have any suggestions for those players, we're going to take a fan vote as well. And so if we get enough people that say, hey, I want to make sure you talk about Lomas Brown, or I want to make sure you talk about Chris Spielman, or I want to make sure that you talk about all of these particular Lions that no one else talks about, and they should, and here's why. Go ahead and let us know. Hit us up in the comments. Hit us up in the live. Hit us up, wherever we are at. We're on all of the tubes, so you can just reach out to us. We have email address. Go to thegraymains.com and let us know. That's going to be coming and starting next week. That is Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated. Boys, what do we have? We've got a few minutes left before we wrap up. Anything else to talk about in terms of the season that was, that we kind of want to maybe sweep under the rug?
Safety and maybe.
I cannot wait to start talking about the draft.
Yep. Well, I'm going to talk about the draft.
I am, for those of you that don't know, we have spent the past, 30 years together, Dan and
Yes.
Mike and Chris. We do live chats every year, back as far as AOL Instant Messenger, and chats and video calls over the past few years, and it's almost sacred time for me to spend these days with the guys and arguing about draft picks and how good or bad they are, and negotiating through and
To
trying to
expand on that, just because we are the Gray Mains, we started off using email.
Yep.
Then we went to AOL Instant Messenger to be live, and we have since migrated into the world of Discord and Slack. And we may be old, but we are keeping up with what the youngsters are doing, in the gaming community and how they handle the communications. So
You guys remember Marlon Schaus started this
yeah,
in like 81, and then we had Dave Barstis that started up the email
the
listserv.
Notre Dame listserv, man, that
That
thing kept
took
us
us
rocking for years.
years.
I used to print out all of those. Like I would open it up and I would go, oh my gosh, there's like 33 things I got to catch up on in the Lions. So I would gather them all up and I would hit print, and I would print them all out, and then I would take them with me, and so that way I would I was a field rep. And so, I would travel to Knoxville or whatever. And so I would sit down and take a break, and I'd start reading. Oh, like Dan thinks that we should draft Gosder Chairless. I mean, what is he? Who is this
Hell
guy?
no, I didn't want that bum.
No, remember Juan Roque? That I had found that
What a
article
body.
about Juan Roque, and I scanned it into the email. When we drafted big old monstrous Juan Roque that he couldn't turn.
Turnstile.
Oh man.
Yeah. No, that was Larry Tharp. Larry Tharp.
Yeah, we drafted him too. He was a 6th rounder.
Aaron Gibson. How about that one?
Gibson.
Oh, geez.
My God, you're just using up all the weight right now
Yeah,
on this.
exactly.
We're going to be overloaded on the elevator going to the bottom.
John Herman, thanks for joining us today. How about Teddy Bridgewater for OC? That's an interesting name.
Absolutely.
That is an interesting name. I don't hate that. It's kind of like,
It's in the same bag that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Quarterback. A guy who's experienced
Trusted.
with a lot of different systems.
Head coaching experience.
Yep. Oh yeah. But that didn't go so well.
Yeah. Whoops. You buy too many hamburgers for the kids. Uber rides.
Yeah, it was kind of, and
too many-
massages. I mean, there was
No. His stuff was legit. He was taking care of his kids because he could.
It was literally massages. Like,
Well, yeah. I mean, they get beat up during the game.
Not Deshaun Watson massages, like real massages.
Right.
It wasn't Deshaun. It was not.
No.
Yes,
he's
Teddy
got
was not giving
legitimate.
happy endings at the end of the massages.
These are legitimate, yes. And yeah, John, we did talk about Harbaugh being fired. Harbaugh's going to get a job. Like, there's no question. There's what
Giants are gonna. Someone's gonna
seven
swoop
open
him up.
positions, and John Harbaugh's just going to go there.
The Giants.
Yeah, no question.
I mean,
yeah,
teams that haven't fired their coaches might rethink. Miami, I'm looking at you. Might rethink whether if they can steal Harbaugh away. I think that Brent. I think you made a good point, or maybe it was Mike. He had run his course with the Ravens. I think everybody had. At a certain point, everybody just like agrees that we need to go our separate ways and get a fresh start for all purposes. And now Lamar. I don't know who posted. I think it was Mike had posted it, and he was saying that he had not really given him an endorsement to come back. And I'm like, well, maybe Lamar shouldn't have gotten freaking hurt, and you wouldn't have to worry about that. You'd be in the playoffs, So it runs both ways, but he definitely needs a fresh start. Giants might be a good place for him. Who knows? I saw the beat writers were salivating over Todd Monken. I think he doesn't really fit the mold. Clearly Campbell's not going that route. He's going for the youngsters. So what do you Giants to already picked him up, Mike? Is that what you're saying there?
Well, it just says here Schefter's reporting that Harbaugh is expected to emerge as a favorite for the head coaching job of the New York Giants. Harbaugh will be in demand for many teams, not just the Giants. Yeah. So yeah, he's going to be.
Yes,
he's going to be.
He can
just
name his
fine.
price, I think.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then real quick, you had said draft talk. Ohio State's Carnell Tate just announced he's leaving early, and most likely we're probably going to get an announcement tomorrow for their stud safety Caleb Downs.
Yeah,
those two guys likely are projected to get picked before our pick at 17.
Absolutely.
So that's just going to push somebody down to us. We don't, I would love to have Caleb Downs. Because we have two guys that we don't know if one's going to be able to ever play again, and another guy that's going to miss a third of the season.
Yeah.
And he's as good as Branch. But we have other needs. We need line, we need edge. We'll see where it goes. But
we're gonna have to give
regardless,
up a lot.
those will push better players down to us. I mean, we got Terrion Arnold because, holy smokes, how far did he fall? Because people kept picking quarterbacks and other positions we didn't have a need for, and they just kept pushing him down until Brad just couldn't stand it and had to go get him. So
and hey, the more players that announce that's gonna, because we talked about this. ESPN had said there's about 11
seniors,
first round graded seniors that were real first rounders, and the more of these juniors that declare, sitting at 17, I was of the opinion that I'd rather win. I don't like the Chicago Bears. I don't like Ben Johnson. I'd rather win, even if we drop a few draft picks. But the reality is, if you get a handful to 10 guys that are juniors to declare, that could push one of those edges, offensive linemen, or Caleb Downs down to us.
There's only 3 quarterbacks as of now. Ty Simpson's borderline first round prospect, but that doesn't stop teams from falling in love with a guy and jumping up to get him. So we saw that with McCarthy. He probably shouldn't have been taken 10th overall. He needed more seasoning, or maybe a little bit lower in the draft, but he went where he went, and that pushed down. Wasn't that the year we got Arnold? So that's one of the guys that pushed Arnold down to us, So, but yeah, Simpson and Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza, those 3 guys, it's 2 for sure are going to go before our pick, but it's possible even Simpson goes before us too. And I don't know, is there any juniors that are like good that might declare? It just feels like there's kind of a dearth of quarterbacks this year.
We'll get into it. We got
yeah.
Here to talk about.
Yeah. We'll definitely be getting into the draft, free agency, and next week probably coaching. There's going to be a number of things, folks. Keep on tuning in every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, because there's plenty of stuff to talk about. There is no off season. There hasn't been an off season for many, many years, especially as it relates to our Detroit Lions. Please smash subscribe, like, all of that great stuff. Share this stuff with another Lions friend. And as always, we like to say, Go Lions.
Go
Lions.
Watch it outside left. Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
Hand off Berry. Skirts to the left side. Breaks a tackle. And he will take it in. Touchdown!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. That's what I'm talking about. It is